So to recap on my previous video, we're going to be clocking the turbo. We need to clock the turbo because the cold side of the turbo's exit is facing where the radiator would be. So by rotating it 90 degrees, we're hoping to get this so it's facing downwards and it's not going to come into contact with the radiator. So this is the turbo as it sits. We're going to rotate the center section. This here we can rotate 180 degrees. Separate, we're going to rotate that 90 degrees so that the turbo is set up for this build. So these are the tools you're going to need. We're going to need some bent nose circlip pliers. You need to use the bent nose circuit pliers. Some people use normal ones and they grind them down so that they can fit, but you're just going to make life hard for yourself. They had these at a local shop, they only cost £3, so it's not worth the stress or the hassle of grinding down some normal pliers. And you'll also need a socket set. For people who want to use the original internal wastegate system, when you rotate this housing, if that doesn't rotate as well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to relocate this bracket. So if you imagine this side now, here, if I was to turn 90 degrees, well, those two bolt holes that are holding the wastegate to the housing, they're not going to be in the correct location. So it's not the end of the world. All it means is either welding this to the housing or welding two little studs to the housing, which you can then bolt the wastegate to. So the first thing we want to do is to remove the wastegate mechanism. To do that, we have to remove this bolt here and this bolt here, and also we need to remove this little circlip that is on the lever, and it will just allow the mechanism to come off. So to remove the circlip, we just got to gently apply some pressure. I say gently, you do need to have some force, but some controlled force. Do not lose this circlip. There's the circlip. Put it somewhere nice and safe. So, now this should just pop off. There we go. So the mechanism has popped off now. That's what controls how much boost your turbo makes. So that is separated now from the exhaust housing. All we got to do is remove these two little bolts now with a spanner. And there we go, there's the wastegate bracket removed. So put that somewhere safe, along with your two bolts and your circlip. The next stage now is to remove a circlip. It's very difficult to see on the camera. Let me just remove this little bolt. So you want to insert your bent nose circlip pliers, one side into that hole, one side into that hole, and you want to squeeze together. When you squeeze together, there's a ring that goes all the way around here, and it's actually inside a little channel up there. So you want to squeeze it together so it becomes small, and then you can pull it towards you and pop it out, and then that will free up the cold side of the turbo so we can remove it. This is supposed to be a two-man job according to some people on the forums, but I'm sure we can manage. So the circlip is removed. I'd like to say that was a quick and easy process, but it wasn't. It was an absolute nightmare, even with the proper pliers. Actually, it's probably taken me half an hour to get that out, and I've had to bend these pliers so that they have a pincer on them so they can grab the ring. I've just found out that these are actually not the correct pliers, so get proper circlet pliers if you're going to attempt this job, because it's not worth the stress and the hassle. So anyway, now that this circlip is off and it's loose, you see a bit there? This should just come straight off now, this cold side housing. So there we go, is the inside of the turbo. And it's the turbine with the dreaded circlip. So there's the cartridge in the middle. Now we just got to remove the exhaust housing, which can be done by undoing this nut here. So that's next. So I'm pretty sure now this should just pop off. Oh, perfect. So that clamp has popped off now, out of the way. Oh, hit the camera. So that's how it was clamped onto the housing beforehand. So I found that this cartridge was actually seized to the exhaust housing. What I did was I got a flathead screwdriver, and there's a little gap down here and here, and I just tapped it out slowly and gently so that it come out square. You don't want it to go off to one side too much, because the turbine on the other side, it will stick to the exhaust housing and you might bend a fin. It's a little bit crude, but it was the only way I could get the cartridge out, and being a 50 quid turbo, it's not the end of the world. They are supposed to just pop out. They're not supposed to actually have much resistance there. So I tapped it out, but I wasn't sure if it was going to cause any damage at the time. But looking at it now, I can see that it's not even a sealing surface, the bit I was tapping. So the seal is on the inside, which I haven't even touched. So I shouldn't have any problems there. So because I've been able to remove this cartridge now, when I reinsert it, I can reinsert it wherever angle I want to. There is a locking pin here though. See the locking pin there? So that pin is going to stop you from putting it in on, any angle you want. So that will have to be removed if you want to do that. So I've taken that little pin out with the flapper wheel. I know I've said it loads of times, but that's not a sealing surface, so it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as the high point is taken out, it will allow this to sit central then when it goes back in. So it's time to refit this. Pop it in. Now let me just think. That is the bottom, and we want it facing that way. So that would be the top. So after tapping that back in the location that I want it, I'm now going to refit the clamp. This will just take it the rest of the way. I'm thinking if I put it down here, it'll be out of the way of any of the fittings. So there we go. The turbo will go that way up. I have my oil feed on the top, oil drain on the bottom, and the water fittings are on the back. So now it's time to refit the cold side of the turbo. I know I want this facing as close to downwards as possible. So in a perfect world, that is how I would have it, straight down. But I've got to be mindful of the original bolt holes for the wastegate. So there's only so far I can go, because I was hoping to reuse at least one of those holes and weld on a stud to the housing. So just so I can get an idea of what I'm dealing with, I'm going to refit this wastegate with one bolt. Okay, so I figured out where I want it, where I can still use the original wastegate. Now it's time to put back in the circlip. So hopefully going in will be a bit easier. So I've made quite good progress this evening. I have rotated this housing. I haven't damaged it in the process, which is always a bonus. Still spinning nice and smoothly. It is possible to damage the blades when removing it, but I didn't have any issues there. I've also managed to adjust the cartridge on the inside of the turbo, so the oil feeds on the top and the oil drain is on the bottom. The mechanism for the wastegate, it doesn't fit at the moment. That is because, as mentioned earlier, I've rotated one side of the turbo, so the mounting brackets, the mounting points that the wastegate would usually go on, they're about 1 inch or 1.5 inches from where they should be. It's not a problem. I can modify the wastegate to fit pretty easily, and I will be making that as my next video. So the next video is going to be modifying the wastegate to fit the clocked turbo. Most people that clock a turbo will just blank off the wastegate in this turbo and using an external one, but I don't really want to do that, because keeping in with the theme of my budget build, I want to use the standard one. Budget doesn't mean rubbish, and if it's good enough for a Subaru WRX, that wastegate, then I'm pretty sure it's going to be more than ample for a Peugeot 106.